a Thursday evening. We are going to get started with our membership meeting. My name is Nicole Pennick, and I'm currently serving as the chair of the Valley Stewardship Network board. And first, I want to just take a moment to shout out to our amazing staff, right? Like, we have the most amazing staff here at the Valley Stewardship Network. So Beth Summers is our executive director, and then we have Shelley Brenneman, who's been with us for a really long time, and she is currently the conservation program specialist. She does a ton of grant writing, and she's really been serving as this historical brain as we transition Beth into her new role. And then we have Nan Marshall, our membership and communications coordinator, and Nan, of course, put this event together with all of the staff. And then we have our program staff. So Danny Heisler over here, she is doing a lot of amazing work on regenerative ag and a lot of our outreach work, so you'll get to hear about all of her programs as well. Dave Creer is handling our native planting. Ben Johnston is our GIS and habitat. And Summer Willis, I don't think Summer is with us, but she is our new bookkeeper, and she's doing an amazing job just helping keep all of those important administrative things running as well. Yeah. And then we have some great consultants that we work with as well. So Abacus Answers is our accounting firm, and they're locally based in Viroqua. And then we have some folks who work with us on a consulting basis. So Frank Spilliker is doing water quality work with us. Jim Munch is our whole farm stewardship planner. And Dennis Rooney is our grazing planner. And so we're excited to have their expertise on board as well. So, of course, it's so important as a nonprofit to remember what our mission is and why we're all here, right? And so we are really here to protect the land and water of the Kickapoo and adjacent watershed regions. And we do this through a ton of research, education, and community empowerment. And you're going to hear all about that work from our staff today. And I know maps are exciting for this crowd. And there's some amazing maps over in the raffle. So I encourage you to check those out. But of course, these show the watershed maps that we work in currently. And then, of course, our board is really great. I feel very fortunate to have such a strong board to work with. And so we have Brad Robeson is our vice chair, and he's a conservation agronomist from Monroe. And then we have Tom Fassbender, who's our treasurer. Aaron Parker, who is our secretary. And then we have Chuck Bolstad, who's been on the board for quite a while as our farmer. I think he's not with us this evening. And then David Van Dyke is here, who's also been on the board. So myself and Chuck are renewing our one-year terms, but everyone else is committed to a 3-year term, I believe. So this is your board going into 2024 as well. And one thing that we have been doing between the board and the staff that we're very excited about, we brought Beth on over a year ago, and one of the things that we quickly realized is we need a strategic plan. Where are we going for the next 3 years? And so we got together just a few months ago, and we looked at all that feedback that we got from the survey. We looked at past program work and past planning that we've done. And we came together and we identified some big strategic questions. What are the questions that VSN needs to wrestle with as we go forward for the next 3 years? And so we formed a committee and we honed that list of like 15 questions down to about 3 to 5. And next week, the board and staff is going to get together and really start to wrestle with those questions. And then as we do that, that'll form our strategic plan for the next 3 years. So stay tuned for more updates as we head into 2024 around that. And so one thing is the survey is really important because we really want to hear from our membership so that we understand what is the desire out there in the countryside. So there's surveys here at the door and there's comment cards on the table. So if you have something that you think we should know or feedback that you think we should hear, please take time to fill those out. And you can always drop those off at the office or reach out with Nan and email those in as well, because we're still wanting to keep collecting that feedback. And so that's where we're at. And then once we get that strategic plan written, the board will approve it, and then we will figure out ways to get it out to all of you as members. And I want to make a special shout out to the River Alliance, because they are like our partners, our big sister, big brother that we work with, and they came and facilitated for free for us to help us with that initial strategic planning work. So we're really grateful for that as well. Yeah. And I'm going to pass it over to Aaron to give a little shout out for this next slide.
Thank you, Nicole. It's great that, is this working?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, good. Yeah, it's great to be able to talk about this right after talking about the strategic plan. I've been on a number of not-for-profits over the years, and I have to say that the facilitation of that was one thing, but and Tom will be talking about the economic picture in a couple of minutes, but I have been really surprised at how robust Valley Stewardship Network is. And as we go through the strategic plan and plan for for what we want to do over the next 3 years, it's looking like we are going to want to have a more robust board as well. And so as we go through all this, I just want to ask you to think about and consider the possibility of joining the board and talk to Beth or one of the other officers afterwards if you're interested. Thank you. Beth?
Actually, I'm going to hand it over to Tom for the financial report.
Well, that's not going to work the way I wanted it to. Okay. No, this will be fine. This will be fine. I just wanted to look at what I was doing. All right, I'm Tom Fassbender, the treasurer of VSN. Here we are, and we're going to talk about some money. VSN has a fiscal year that starts on July 1st of every year. So, this being November, we've only got 3 months of data to present to you for this fiscal year. So we're going to do that, but we're going to kind of look a little compare and contrast to the 21-22 fiscal year and then the 22-23 fiscal year. Some changes happened along here. So as you can see, we had some growth in our income. And primarily in 21-22, it was mostly grants and contracts. We had a couple of very large grants that ended that year, and our membership and contributions is solid. And then events and sales was a little slice that we got there. The grants are great because grants allow us to do the work that we do, but they're often tied to a very specific set of criteria that we've got to follow. And so that money is kind of earmarked for certain tasks and jobs that go along with those grants. What's really nice about the membership and contributions is that is money that comes free of strings. So we can use that to do whatever we want to do, operating expenses, overhead, staff, events, what have you. So in 2022-23, we grew a little bit, started to do a little more events and sales. Our membership contributions grew a little bit, but that one of the big grants that we had in 22 stopped coming, so our slice went down a little bit there. But now we can look over to expenses in 21-22. We had most of it went to meetings and programs. We did have some payroll expenses, operating expenses, and then fees and services. Similar story. Again, with more money coming in, more money is also going out. So, as our income increases, so do our expenses. So our operating expenses went up a little bit, fees and services went up. You might notice there's a big bump in payroll. This happened when we hired a few people this year, and we also introduced a benefits program for the employees. As Nicole pointed out, we've got amazing employees. We want to keep them happy, so benefits program. And that is where, that's kind of why you see that big growth in the expenses on payroll. So we're going to jump ahead to this year so far. Events and sales is a larger slice, and that has a lot to do with a lot of the work that Nan's been doing, selling at various, you may have seen us set up at the farmer's market and other places around town, selling our, we've got all sorts of goods and services to buy, goods to buy, not services. We've got, pint glasses, you can never have enough pint glasses. We've got bird-friendly coffee, we've got bird strike tape, and t-shirts, of course, big t-shirt sales. So that helped bump the events and sales up. Grants and contracts is down a little bit. We currently have about 8 grants that we're working on, and we do have applications in for, I'm not sure how many more, but a few more that we're hoping to get. So again, this is only the first quarter, the first 3 months. We're looking to see that number come up soon. And likewise, our membership is up a little bit comparatively. So expense-wise, right now, most of it goes to payroll. We've only got 3 months in, so it seems a little skewed, but as the grant money comes in, the meetings and programs is going to increase, and that you'll see something that looks a little bit more like last year's pie chart. Same with fees and services and operating expenses; those will scale accordingly. So, yes.
Quick question: do we actually have cash reserves enough to cover, for instance, payroll when there's a gap in the grant fund?
We do have cash reserves, yes.
Okay,
Thank you for asking. And that is about the outlook of our financial picture this year. It's looking good. We're certainly optimistic about the grants that are going to be coming in and the work that we'll be doing there. So, and you'll continue to see us selling things out in the community. Questions, comments? Yeah.
Do you have specifics on any of the grants that you applied for?
There is a slide.
Yes, I do not. We'll get to that, definitely. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Tom, for the financial report. So now we're going to turn it over to Nan with our membership overview.
Hello, good evening. I'm Nan Marshall, the Membership and Communications Coordinator. I am so happy to see so many of our members together all in one place. Thank you all for all the contributions you've made so far. A quick overview of our membership shows that we had about 165 members throughout 2023, with 10 new members joining us. We've had members in 7 different states: Florida, Delaware, Minnesota, and Georgia, and others. And of course, in Wisconsin, where we have members in 28 different cities in Wisconsin, including Madison, Boscobel, Whitefish Bay, and Prairie du Chien, among others. Of course, most of our members are in the Viroqua, Lafarge, Westby, Viola area. So far in 2023, we've received almost $60,000 in donations. The number of donors was similar to last year, but the total is higher. And we received our first large legacy donation from someone who wasn't even a member, but they appreciated the work we were doing in the area. Our theme for this year has been connection to sense of place. Often, our culture is quite transitory in nature, and sometimes people don't really stop to appreciate the places that they live in. So we figured that encouraging people to connect to their community and landscape increases their caring for the environment and enjoying the place they're in and developing roots in their community. So Valley Stewardship Network, of course, also appreciates being part of the greater community. So we all enjoy carrying out important environmental work in the area that we actually live in. I find it personally gratifying to see the benefits of the work that we do, right where I live. Therefore, in addition to our grant-funded work, we strive to reach into the community to share our vision and our knowledge of this place that we all like to call home. And we also work to be a resource to the community and contribute back what people give to us. This photo here shows Beth at the library with our new Enviroscape environmental model. We chose one that has a landscape that's very similar to the landscape we live in, with farms, a few industrial places, residences, and so forth. And so it's kind of fun because you sprinkle pollutants on it, Kool-Aid and cocoa powder, and then you get to put rain on it, and there's actually a rain cloud shaped sprinkle bottle that you rain on it. The kids really like that part. And then you can see the runoff and see where it goes and how it affects the streams and lakes and so forth. And then you get to make and place solutions to some of those problems. You know, plants with large roots, which are really Q-tips, and we build little clay dams and put in prairies that are little sponges and all. And then you sprinkle the pollutants on again and rain on it again, and you get a whole different effect. And it's fun for kids, but it's also really great for adults because it brings up a lot of questions that maybe they haven't thought about. So we were able to purchase the Enviroscape model with the funds that we received from the Europa Food Co-op Give Where You Live program from both the co-op and the members of the co-op, so we're very grateful for that. And then we had other events where we connected with the community. We hosted a book garden for the Ridges to Rivers Book Festival, where we had several authors come who read from their writings and poems about their connection to their sense of place, which was really awesome. We planned 6 events with the Macintosh Memorial Library that were both for children and adults. We were at the farmers market several days in the summer and really enjoyed meeting both visitors to the area and native Iroquois, of course. We were part of the Sit and Pretty Farm Pizza fundraiser, met a lot of different people there. And finally, last year we finally restarted our Conservation on Tap series. It's an environmental presentation series where we invite experts to come and speak. And so we went through April this year, and then we just restarted the series now in October. It's the first Tuesday of every month at the historic Fort Meade Hotel, which is a lovely place. So this just quickly shows we had probably over 300 people that we actually signed up at events or that were attended events, and that doesn't count all the other people who drifted through the farmers markets or the Sit and Pretty or other events like that. And we also participated in things like the downtown sidewalk sales, which even our board member, Tom, helped out with. And he also joins me at the farmers market, which is great to have him, the board members, meeting the community. And the downtown trick-or-treat, and I had interesting conversations with parents. They were looking for something too there. I'd like to definitely thank all of you for coming tonight, because members are a big part of everything that we do. You help elect our board and have input into our strategic planning process. You help us, our water action volunteers help us collect data that we use and goes into the database for the whole state. And in particular, you help support our community outreach programs by donations and becoming members. And that money, as Tom mentioned before, supports programs that we don't have grant funding for, and is very important to use for our community outreach and our connections to the community. Speaking of fundraisers, we have a nice silent auction over here tonight. I hope you all took an opportunity to look at our offerings. The aerial photograph was donated by Harry Peterson. He's a member. It's of the Harrison Hollow area, a little south of town. The Historic Temple Theater which is loved and renovated by the community, has donated a $100 gift certificate, good for any show. Utopia, local yarn shop and fiber mill, some of their yarn that they made in their fiber mill and some knitting needles. Physiology donated a quart of kimchi. And Community Conservation, who shares our office space and is a nonprofit community-based organization that works to preserve biodiversity worldwide. They work with the local communities wherever they go. Have donated one of their cool t-shirts and a woven shoulder bag from Thailand. And we also are very proud to have maps designed by one of our members, Thomas Wise. He loves maps and he has an artistic bent and produced those digitally. He also helped make our t-shirt designs with Mike Papa, who's over here. So thank you very much for our wonderful t-shirt designs. I see more and more people around town wearing them. It always makes me happy. Anyway, I hope that you can find something that tempts you over on our silent auction table. We'll give you a few minutes after the presentation to put down any final bids you might have. And we'd like to just quickly thank all our other local business donors, and special thanks to our major donors. And next up, we're going to hear about our current programs. Thanks,
Thank you, Nan. So I'm going to do an overview of the program areas that we're currently working in. Water quality research is one of our oldest program areas that's been going since the beginning of VSN. And over the last few years, we've done a lot more work in working with watershed councils, which Danny will talk about later, as well as regenerative grazing and how that impacts water quality. We've really been growing our prairie strips and plant native for biodiversity programs. And a recent program area that Shelley will describe later is watershed planning that we're getting into. We do on-farm research and demonstration. And I'll talk to you a little bit about our new efforts in bird habitat and bird-friendly farming. And then finally, we work with youth and community education, as Nan talked about a little bit. So we work with really a huge array of different partners, from the different watershed councils to other nonprofits, government and non-governmental agencies, the Ho-Chunk Nation, university projects, as well as many, many others. So the list goes on. This year was a huge grant writing push for us. As Tom mentioned, we're kind of in an in-between phase where we had some major grants that we pushed really hard on and wrapped up, and they all kind of seem to end simultaneously. So we've been working really hard on grant writing to figure out what our next big projects are going to be. And in 2023, we wrote over $1.3 million in grants. So Shelley has been an amazing grant writing mentor. I can't thank her enough for all of the work that we've put in just plugging away at these grants. And really, as a whole team, the staff has been incredible banding together and getting these grants proposals in. So some of the proposals we put in were through the Natural Resources Conservation Service, the Environmental Protection Agency, the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, Fishers and Farmers, the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, and the Wisconsin Bird Conservation Partnership. The grant funds that we worked under in the previous fiscal year, the 22-23 fiscal year, we had quite a few different ones. We worked on a undesignated grant through the Laird Norton Family Foundation. And we recently hosted them on a tour of all of our different activities that we're doing in this area, and we really had a wonderful time showing them all that they've been able to support for VSN. In the winter of 22-23, we wrapped up a really big project with the Wallace Center at Winrock International, And that was a grazing project in the Tainter Creek that Danny will talk a little bit about. We worked with the Fishers and Farmers Partnership for the Upper Mississippi River, and that funded prairie strips, water quality, watershed councils, and youth education. And we've received word that we will, as long as the federal budget passes, that we'll be able to continue our work with Fishers and Farmers. We worked with the North Central Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education, or SARE project, on soil health, water quality, and biodiversity stewardship. And for Trout Unlimited, we we're working on a National Fish and Wildlife Foundation project for grass-based agriculture, grazing, and stewardship outreach. For the University of Wisconsin-Madison Grassland 2.0 project, we've been serving as the Ridge and Valley Learning Hub. They have a number of different learning hubs throughout Wisconsin and Northern Illinois, and I believe into Iowa too. But we're the coordinators for this area. Through Organic Valley, we have been funded through their Driftless Clean Energy program. A newer project that we're working on is the Kickapoo Bird Habitat Initiative, and we're doing outreach and education for forest and grassland bird habitat for them, and I'll talk more about the details of that project later. Our Plant Native for Biodiversity program has been a success. We put out a call to members who wanted to donate specifically to fund prairie plantings, and created a designated fund for that, and we've been able to pay for seed for prairie plantings using that fund on a number of properties in our area. And then finally, we've been subcontracted by the Sand County Foundation to work with their Regional Conservation Partnership Program to do outreach for NRCS conservation practices. So I'll talk a little bit about our water quality sampling program. Like I mentioned, that's one of the backbones, really a foundational program for VSN that's been going on since its inception, and we've expanded our water quality sampling efforts in recent years. Part of the usefulness of that data is to report back to the local watershed council so that we can give them a measure of the current status in their watersheds. And we can also look at changes over time and do comparisons to see what kind of impact the conservation practices that people are installing might actually be having. Specifically in Tainter Creek, where there was really a widespread push to put in regenerative grazing practices, we are looking at pre and post data and making comparisons over time, and we're able to actually start to see some nutrient reductions in Tainter Creek as a result of those conservation grazing practices. Right now, this year, we had a total of 26 sampling sites that our water quality contractor, Frank Spilker, visited. And our sampling takes place once per month at each of our locations from May through October. And we take some of those variables are sampled on site, so that's dissolved oxygen, temperature, turbidity, and then there's a couple that we actually send into a lab, the State Lab of Hygiene, to have a laboratory analysis, so looking at the phosphorus and nitrogen in the water. And phosphorus is really one of our best indicators of changes over time as a result of conservation practices, and that's the one that we're starting to see some differences in Tainter Creek following our grazing installations. And then additionally, once every few years or so, we get a snapshot of what's going on with the macroinvertebrate, the insects and other organisms that live at the bottom of the stream, to give us an indicator of really all of the environmental effects. They kind of synthesize all the things that are going on And so it sometimes may be able to reflect variables that we aren't even directly measuring. So I'm going to have Ben come up and talk about our Water Action volunteer program, since he coordinated that this year.
I always wanted to be on stage and say something like, "Hello, Veroka, are you ready to rock?" You know, and then like smash the guitar. Sorry. So Water Action Volunteers, it's a citizen-based program, and we are collecting data for the same data that Beth just talked about, and in theory, we'd have volunteers throughout the area collecting their information, and then we submit it into the SWIMS database, which is administered by the DNR, yeah, DNR. Yeah, questions so far? So this year we had 3 trainings. The 2 in Wilton were probably they were more successful, partly because they were at my house, and partly because I had Gina prepare a lunch.
Yeah.
And I personally invited all those 15 to 20 people. And as I told them, it was partly a ploy on my part, because if I invite people to come to help, then I have to do it. And but then also, brings people together into trying things. It was a good time. And we did the one at Sidey Hollow. That turned out okay. It wasn't a great turnout, etc. We did some field demonstrations for Veroka Middle School down at Sugar Creek Bible Camp down. Yeah, they went down there, so I had to follow them down there, and we did some of the steps in the wave training. Did a local homeschool group, and I also went over to the Youth Initiative High School and did a dissolved oxygen exercise with the students in the classroom. Some of them did tap water, some of them did real water, but whichever. It's all about the process. It went fine. And so we being VSN have, in the past there's been apparently a great number of volunteers that VSN's coordinating with to get this data from WAVE. That number has decreased. It decreased before I came on, which has nothing to do with me. But apparently, it's the old cliche of the old standard of before COVID. And so we're hoping to recruit more people. I contacted WAVE Madison, and I said, hey, what's going, is it me? Is it anything? They said, well, with volunteers, it's like that. Some years you'll have more, some years you have less. Some regions or some areas have great support or great participation. Other areas, not so much, and it all just kind of depends. And so what they suggest is I do more trainings. And mix it up a bit. I can't provide lunch for everybody and everyone, but it might work. They also suggest that I go through volunteer groups, and rather than trying to target individuals. And then she did say that some of these WAVE organizations, similar to us, have like newsletters and potlucks and all that such. And I don't know if we'd ever get to that, but it's a possibility. But I am looking to start doing WAVE more as a group effort, which is what I found to be successful when we had these at my house. I invited friends over, I invited the neighbor kids, and it was a blast. We had a good time, and then again, then there was lunch. And so I think what would be helpful is if you had an instigator, as I like to call them, at a site, who then bring their friends in and their people in to help with the project. And that way it's never really relying on one person or 2 people. It's more of a group effort. So if anyone has ideas, don't yell them out now, please don't forget them. But if you have ideas of who I could reach out to or groups, And then hopefully we can get some more volunteers out there collecting water samples. Yeah, as I always say, if you want to have, you know, the party's fun, but if you invite a few kids over, it really just ups the excitement level. Any other questions, thoughts, concerns? I think I'm done there. Yes, thank you. Anybody else? Thank you.
Well, I'm not nearly as amusing as Ben, but I used to be the wave coordinator, so I guess I can take the responsibility for the decline in all waves.
I wasn't pointing fingers.
So thanks for that, Ben. So I'm Dave Preer, and now I'm doing native plantings, so I'm the native plantings coordinator. So one thing, I'm going to show you a couple slides here. This was a great year because it was one of the driest years we've had in a while. So it really proved the value that native plantings can have on the high water side of things as well as on the low water side of things. So I'll show you a couple slides talking about that. This year we've already planted 8 acres, and I want to thank Tom Lukens because those 8 acres were some 8 hard acres to get planted, and Tom is our board chair emeritus, and he helped out a huge amount with equipment and getting stuff there and labor. Coming out and planting stuff, so thank you, Tom, for helping us. We have another 3.5 acres. I'm going to plant about a 1/2 acre tomorrow, and then 3 acres next week, and that'll be it for the year. So we're going to get 11.5 acres in this year, which is great.
Yeah.
We're continuing to work on some in-town commercial properties. We have one, which is actually looking fantastic, even with the dry year we had. So that's about 2.5 or 3 acres just on the north side of the new Sleepy Hollow Ford facility. So he has a bigger, Spanky has a bigger plot than just the building, and so on half of that we planted prairie. This year it looked really, really great up until June, and then it did okay. It's only its 3rd year. Next year it's going to be great, so if you're driving by Sleepy Hollow Ford and you see a whole bunch of flowers and stuff out there next year, that's us and Spanky. So. But we have some other properties that we're working on this year and next year to get planted. We probably would have had some better success without the dry weather, but we're still working on 2 other properties. And then we have a potential for 4.5 acres on a commercial development that's happening in the city of Viroqua, which realistically we're probably not going to get planted for another 3 years or so, but that's going to be great. Yeah, Kathy.
How do you structure those arrangements with the city and those kind of things? Do they cover some costs, or do we have to donate it, or what?
No, usually it's between the property owner, the business owner, and us. In the case of Sleepy Hollow, we did need to get some permissions from the folks that are managing that industrial park, because they have certain things that they have to comply with. But the other ones are really just, it's their individual property, and they're sort of doing what they want to do with it. All right, so this is just a graph of showing so starting in 2017, going up through 2023, showing how many acres we've got planted. So we're up to 62 acres that we've planted. And that includes the 3.5 acres that I'm going to be doing here in this next couple of weeks. We're over 750 acres draining through those prairie plantings. So I think still great success that we're doing. This is a couple of pictures of some of those installations. This is one of the commercial installations that we planted this spring. So two more slides I've got. This one is talking about, so a native planting, a prairie strip, really is, you know, in a farm setting typically, but sometimes in cities. The idea is you plant native plants, they have really deep roots, they have really thick, strong stems. And in addition to all the benefits you get for biodiversity, you know, supporting birds, supporting pollinators and things like that, they're really excellent at slowing down water that's flowing off the land. So you can imagine in high rain years, water is sheeting off of farm fields and running down into streams, and you get flash floods. A prairie strip is really an excellent resource for trying to slow that water down and keep the water on the land instead of shooting it off to your neighbor downstream somewhere. So we've been fortunate that we've got a 6-year-old strip on a farm that we helped to plant, and we've been monitoring it for 6 years and taking data. So one of the pieces of data that I take is water infiltration. So I pound a ring into the ground and I pour water on it, and then I measure how long it takes for that water to soak into the ground. And because this is in a farm field, I can move 10 feet over here, and I'm in either, depending on the year, a soybean or a cornfield. and I can move 10 feet over here, and I'm in a prairie strip that might, when we first started, it was just a couple years old. Now it's 6 years old. And this is all of that data synthesized down. So it's, a couple arrows are missing, but this area right here that's kind of in yellows and oranges, this is the same prairie strip, the same spot, same GPS location. I've gone in 3 different years and done the water sampling. So this was the first year, second year, and third year. So the prairie strip, as it matures, as those roots get deeper, as the plants get more mature, as they get bigger, the strip is getting more efficient at absorbing water. So this is how many inches of water I've poured in, and this is time. So you can see that a couple of years into that prairie strip, we were coming up here and we were getting maybe 3 inches of water in about an hour. Now we're up to over 5 inches of water in that same amount of time. So in 1 hour, the prairie strip is able to absorb 5 inches of rain. 20 feet away, inside the corn and soybeans, depending on the year, are kind of these two blue curves. What's great is that they're almost the same. I mean, so, because there's nothing particularly different happening, it's just a cornfield or soybean field. So we would hope that it would have about the same water infiltration rate year after year, and it pretty much does. And you can see that in 1 hour, which is here, if you could see this closer, it's about 2.5 inches. So right with the prairie strip, we're effectively able to double the amount of water that ground can infiltrate compared to corn and soybeans. Doesn't mean we shouldn't plant corn and soybeans, because we need those to make money and people need to live on their farms. But if we can put a prairie strip every now and then to try to help slow that water down and absorb it, we're proving here in Vernon County, here with our soil, with our farming techniques, with our folks, that a prairie strip is effective at being able to infiltrate water faster. So that's important when we're having a lot of rain, whether it's one event that's 18 inches or whether it's a whole bunch of 4 or 5 inch rains. A prairie strip is really good at doing that. On the other side of things is this year, which is super, super dry. So we don't really need to infiltrate a lot of water. We want to hold on to it, and prairie strips are good at that too. They're good at being a sponge and just kind of holding water more than a typical farm field. But the other thing, and this was really Danny's idea, was to say, let's take some, because we know some folks that have prairies and prairie strips, and they harvest that material just like they would a crop of alfalfa. They bale it up and then they feed it to sheep or cows, things like that. And so we wondered what would happen if we did a forage analysis. So what's the value to the farmer, what's the value to the animal of that forage compared to alfalfa or hay or something like that. And what we found is that it's actually really good, which in some ways isn't surprising. Big blue stem and small little blue stem are both outstanding forage grasses, which are big parts of a prairie. But Danny did the analysis and really showed that compared to, and the other thing that's good about a prairie is they're typically warm season plants compared to other non-native things, which are cool season plants. So in a really hot, dry year like we had this year, they grow compared to a lot of other things that weren't. So you saw people out, at least I did, along the sides of the road, and there's just grass out there, and people were baling it up because they know that their pastures weren't so great this year. So anybody that has a prairie strip and they were baling it or putting their animals out to graze on it actually had excellent forage value. So that's this row and this row compared to an early bloom alfalfa and a grass hay mix. I'm not an expert on forage values, but it works out pretty good. One of the things we wanted to prove too was comparing 2022 native plantings versus 2023, because 2023 was much, much drier. And you can actually see that it's actually a little bit better this year compared to last year, which also supports that theory that in hot, dry years, a native prairie can be used as an outstanding forage buffer or insurance for your regular forage crops. We think that part of the reason why this year was particularly good is there's a little bit of a concentration of some of those nutrients in those plants compared to a wetter year where things are just growing much more. So in a dry year, the plants concentrate some of those resources. Yeah.
Have you seen successful integration year over year of grazing native prairie strips, or does it kind of damage your planting? Just do not letting that seed out. Is it more important of when you graze it, not if you graze it? Good
question. I would have said before this year and some of the work that Danny's done that it was much better to, if you're going to bale it or pasture it, to do that and then let it rest for a couple of years and do its own thing. But part of this data came from somebody who actually harvests their native prairie every year. I would say that that's too much, but they do it every year, and I gotta say, it looks fantastic, and there's huge amount of biodiversity within that prairie planting, so for whatever reason, they're getting away with it, but it's not something I would just advocate for to anybody, but it is working for them.
What's the cost difference between if I'm gonna put in 5 acres of native prairie versus if I'm gonna put in a 5-way grass mix that I can buy at the council?
I'm guessing 200 times more. I mean, I would say our pasture mixes vary depending on anywhere from $250 to $800 an acre for the seed alone. And I'm guessing you can buy, you know, a general pasture mix for $25 an acre, is my guess. So probably, I don't know, something like that.
To that point though, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the prairie is behind what you want to try to see.
That's why I asked about the grazing year over year.
Yeah.
I can see the value if you're able to do that without damaging. I don't mean to derail the
No, it's a good question.
Yeah, after that, I think it's, like, getting the native planting established is really critical, but then, like, the resiliency long-term is, like, very, very different relative to, like, a more, like, traditional grazing pasture. So, like, while they can be great, like, while these natives can be grazed and are great forage value, they have a much different, like, resiliency and ability to be grazed. So when we look at, like, seed cost and, like, planting cost, I wouldn't maybe look at it so much like one-dimensionally. I would consider, like, taking it all into consideration. So yeah, I think, like, there's a lot of factors in that, but yeah.
No, I think some of the other work we've done in whole farm analysis of trying to figure out, I think resilience is a great word to use for this because it works great in the high rain, high wet years. It also is very, very resilient in dry years. And it is, and I don't know that I would advocate that any farm just takes their entire thing and put it in the native pasture. But it is a really good, if you're gonna do parts of your farm and to do it with a different crop, with super high biodiversity, which has a lot of other benefits for it as well. I think it's a good insurance to have, well, now suddenly I've got 10 acres that is doing great in a super drought year when the rest of my pasture is so terrible. So, resilience is a great word for it. Yeah. Okay, I think that was my last slide. So, now it's Danny.
Thanks, Dave. All right. I will talk a little bit about the Tanner Creek Grazing Project first, and to that point, I guess, so Dave and I kind of talked or volleyed a little bit about the native plantings, and so I think that's kind of a testament to a lot of the work that we do kind of as a team here at VSN, is that I think although it's kind of separate program work, I think you'll find that a lot of our programs kind of I think as we continue to work in the community, our programs kind of work together and fringe together pretty closly. So I'm giving you a preview. Sorry, close your eyes. All right, now I'm back to where I'm supposed to be. So a lot of our programs, they really kind of fringe together, and so it gives us the opportunities to kind of work in our respective areas where we're kind of maybe more of the experts of what the content that we know pretty well, but work together really a lot and also. So kind of give you an update on the Tanner Creek Grazing Project. That was something that it was a 3-year grant that we closed out at the beginning of this year. We got to celebrate big. So I'll give you the spoiler right away. We celebrated big in January. So it was a lofty goal of 5% sediment reduction and 5% phosphorus reduction in 3 years for the Tanner Creek the Tanner Creek watershed. Which, if when we talk about watersheds, I think we're all fairly fluent in watersheds. It's a Huck 12, so we're talking pretty small. And when we initially started this project and we went to Tanner Creek, they, you know, as a group of landowners and farmers, they're all kind of looking at each other going, this seems like a pretty big project. And I don't know if we're really that interested. But they embraced it, and through a whole lot of coaxing and encouragement and a lot of suggestions, we did continue to get some implementation and practices on farm, and so it was really a work towards managed grazing and implementing that, you know, I guess from maybe tillable ground to managed grazing, right, or in any combination thereof. So whether it was perimeter pastures around tillable ground so we could late season graze, or it was complete conversion from some more high-risk ground to pasture. That was any combination of. Oh, 1 second. So, through the course of the 3 years, we had 14 farms that went through the process of going through, working with myself, kind of doing the consultations, and myself and Monique working through the consultations and the mapping, and kind of reinventing like what these farms could look like, taking them from how they laid now, and you know, to what could be, right? Which is a little bit of a mind bender when we start that process. And then working with Jim, doing a whole farm assessment, and then Jim Munch doing a whole farm assessment, and Dennis Rooney doing the pasture planning. And it's a lot of, you know, back and forth and reimagining things, and we went through a lot of maps and a lot of markers. And there was a lot of hours sitting at the conference table reimagining what fences and things could look like. And it, you know, honestly is really fun. You know, some of these projects, there was 3 farms that, you know, we couldn't get all the way to the finish line, and that's okay. You know, because we still talk, and and sometimes they ask like, hey, is there another grant like this? Like, you think there's another opportunity? Because that stuff still is in their mind. It still means like they still want to get there. They still want to graze. They still have that's on the forefront, right? So that means that we're still moving forward with something. The idea is there. So 11 farms went to the finish line. That means like they put up fence. They went from some variation of tillable to some variation of pasture. That means there's more livestock on the landscape, more perennial grass, more, whether it's, you know, there's some native plantings, there's some, you know, perennial grass, there's a lot more covers put into place, and a lot more nutrients held exactly where we wanted it to be. Whether that's water, whether that's phosphorus, whether that's sediment, and a lot less that ended up in Tanner Creek. And a lot less meaning a lot more than 5%. So what we ended up with was an estimated 2,300 pounds of phosphorus and 1,600 tons of sediment prevented from leaving the fields each year. That is nearly double our goal. So when you talk about 11 farms in a Huck 12, so in our Tanner Creek watershed, and they nearly doubled the goal. These farms, they're like, they did not expect this, okay? Like, this is the kind of stuff that like makes me all excited, and makes all my little arm hairs stand up, okay? So this is, because every year, every fall when they're asking, does it really pay to plant this 20 acres in cover crops? Does it really matter? These are the things that when I say, yep, it does. Yes, it does. Because as we're measuring water quality, right, our surface water quality measurements, those are the ways that we ground truth these numbers, right? Because our estimated numbers, they weren't necessarily just models, right? So part of the Tanner Creek Grazing Project was based off of models that we worked with the Wallace Center and UW-Madison to help develop a model system, but also we ground truthed it through actual surface water sampling. So that's what is so tremendous about this particular project, is that it's literally project implementation. So we're out there fencing, making things happen on the landscape. And then we're developing a model with Wallace and UW. And then we're out there sampling the water. So it's like this beautiful trifecta, right? So we've got this whole thing going on. And we have proven that we can make changes on the landscape and make changes in the water. And so what we would anticipate is that if we're exclusively just making changes on the landscape by perennial grass, we would not have that rapid of an expectation of change in water quality over the course of 3 years, especially being that our projects were implemented later in the 3-year cycle. But what helped us so quick was a lot of the cover crops early on. So we had a lot of that ground covered early, and that made a lot of traction quick. So that helped us for some quick nutrient reduction. And so when everybody said, does every 20 acres matter? I said yes, it sure does. So a couple questions. Yeah.
How directly does this model success transfer within NRCS and DNR? I mean, people are getting this information and it's being used?
So the models are, so that's Grayscape, and that is developed by UW. So it is readily available by UW, and it's continued to be used and kind of pushed out, but I don't know that it's not necessarily adapted or adopted by DNR, and they're also, agencies are so pillared, they each have their own way of doing things. But, yeah. And behind, yep.
The 986 acres, is that the amount of farmland total that's involved in 14 farms, or is that the amount of land converted from mostly row crop or annual crop to mostly pasture?
Yeah, that was the acreage involved in those 14 farms that were part of the project.
Okay.
So not total acres of those farms. That was included in the project acres. So, yeah, good question. Yeah, so it would have been less than 1,000 acres that would have made that kind of an impact. So, which is what it is a testament to, truly our topography is really what the topography in Tainter Creek has, that kind of an impact on nutrient holding, really. So long story short, we partied hard. And well deserved, right? So, any other questions about that one? Okay. All right, and then the second biggie for this year is all of our excitement with the watershed councils. So I think last year maybe we gave a little bit of an update. We have 4 active watershed councils that are farmer-led, kind of within the area that we generally work in. Tainter Creek, as we just kind of talked about, they're kind of the originals that started in 2006, the end of 2016, following the flood time then. They started up, and then the following after that was Coon Creek Community Watershed Council, and then Bad Axe Watershed Stewards, and then the most recent, what has been the Rush Creek Watershed Conservation Council. So the 4 watershed councils, each very, very different in the folks that make up each council, kind of what their goals and how they get together, any of their kind of, everything about them is very different. And that's what makes working with them so much fun. But also that's what we kind of recognized individually, I recognized a couple years ago that when we have 4 councils, this close together, you know, serving between La Crosse, Monroe, Vernon, Crawford counties, that's a lot. You know, it's an amazing thing. We're so lucky. We're one of the few areas in the state to have this kind of a concentration where we have this many people active in watershed councils that have taken this much of an interest. So when you look at the map that DATCAP has on the producer ladder, the watershed groups, it's really amazing to see all the continued involvement of watershed councils pop up. But what you don't necessarily see is this many smaller watershed councils, because truthfully, DATCAP encourages that councils become larger, or they encourage them to be a little bit farther apart. But what we found from our own culture here is that people want to spend time with their neighbors. They want their neighbors to be there because we enjoy visiting with our neighbors, right? We want to know that our neighbors are with us, that it's just part of the culture. And it's a little bit more difficult to gather when you got to drive 2 counties away. So that's just part of what has made these councils so successful, and that's just part of the culture. So we encourage the 4 to be here, but we also know that part of what we need to do to provide some of the great service is to help maybe build an umbrella organization. So that was one of the big initiatives this year in 2023 was to build the Hill Country Watershed Alliance, or help support building the Hill Country Watershed Alliance. So the purpose of the HCWA is to provide support for participating watershed organizations involved in conservation stewardship, for environmental quality and protection, agriculture, community improvement, and educational purposes. So as of September, that was an official 501c3. We had made it all the way through to serve all of its purposes and serve all the benefits as like a true umbrella organization for the watershed councils. And so as VSN has done through the years, helped kind of fledge other kind of organizations to really help support the community, and Hill Country Watershed Alliance is another one of those. So we've been very, very fortunate to help kind of build that out for the watershed councils and watch as they continue to be successful. So we'll see the next chapter for them. So I guess unless there's questions, I'll leave it be. Thank you.
Danny. I'm going to turn it over to Shelley now.
Getting a little short on time. We're okay but we'll just try it.
And move it along.
Yeah, for sure. We just have a few more slides. So, like Beth said, we're kind of moving into some new program areas where we're starting to really focus on the solutions. We're working in these watersheds with watershed councils and realizing that we're honing down our focus to flood control, reducing runoff and erosion, and improving water quality. And so we've gone kind of a full spectrum over the last 25 years or so, from measuring what's going on in the watershed to what are some of the issues, and now focusing on the solutions that we can measure the impacts of. So we're kind of entering the sort of landscape scale watershed work. So managed grazing is a big part of that, which you just heard about, as well as native prairie plantings. And then our work continues to monitor, map, and model the impacts, hopefully mostly positive impacts of our watershed work. So one specific example of this, we're working with the Coon Creek Watershed Council to start doing some watershed planning, this official process. So the first grant that we helped them achieve was for this year through their DNR, which was the first 2 steps in a 9-key element watershed plan, which is part of an EPA official watershed planning process. So we're just finishing that up, and I want to give Ben a shout out because Ben is the one who makes these beautiful GIS maps. The first one with a lot of the green is part of characterizing the watershed. So the first two steps in the plan this year was to look at the entire watershed. What are the issues? What are the land use? What's the land cover? You know, what type of agriculture is happening? What are some of the impacts? What are some of the water quality issues? We added 6 water quality sites to Coon Creek this year in order to do this plan. And then we're starting with Vernon County Land and Water for next year to do all 9 steps of a watershed plan for Coon Creek. So that's very exciting news that getting started with 1 and 2 this year has led to being able to do all 9 next year. But it will actually be for one Huck 12 sized sub-watershed of Coon Creek instead of the whole entire watershed, which will be easy to focus the work, make it be a little bit more targeted, and hopefully we'll be able to apply to the entire watershed when you look at the decisions that were made in the plan. So I won't belabor this. You could talk about EPA 9 key element watershed plans all night, but I won't belabor it. But essentially, it's a community-driven process, so we're really glad that all the watershed councils exist to be able to have a lot of community input, a lot of landowner input. The plan will end up with obviously an implementation roadmap, and it qualifies the watershed for larger state and federal funding, so they can actually do some major on-the-ground vegetative practices that are going to hopefully be really helpful for flood management that Coon Creek has really suffered from over the years. 6 steps of the planning process involve the stakeholders, assessing the watershed, which is a lot of what VSN does. We'll work together with Coon Creek to develop a plan, and then hopefully in years forward the plan will be implemented. VSN can still continue to help monitor the results and then modify the plan as necessary. So we're excited to get into this new, more official watershed planning process. A couple more projects that we're involved with. Grassland 2.0, which was mentioned, is a UW-Madison project. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hubs around the Midwest. We manage, or we coordinate the Ridge and Valley Learning Hub here. And so VSN's been really involved since the beginning. We also, with Monique's work with the Tanner Project, helped develop this model called SmartScape. And that's a watershed planning tool. And so we're really proud that our staff was a big part of developing that tool, and we were all recently trained in how to use that tool. So that's something that we can offer landowners, community groups, watershed councils. We're excited that this year is the second of 2 to maybe 3 years of the Driftless Area Conservation Partnership with the Sand County Foundation, which is focused on savanna restoration, prairie buffers, and prescribed grazing. And so this is an NRCS program with a specific pot of money called RCPP to help implement these kind of climate smart practices throughout the Driftless area. So we've been really excited to be a part of that. Related to that, and the farm that Dave was talking about with the 5- and 6-year-old prairie strips is Dave Van Dyke's farm. We're really so grateful to him for pioneering the prairie strips in our area. He has 1-, 3-, and 5-year strips, and we were able to coordinate a field day with Farm Service Agency and Natural Resource Conservation Service staff to learn about prairie strips. So instead of them sort of just looking at it as a theoretical practice, they were able to go out on the ground, look at these different year prairie strips, and learn about how to best develop those. Dave's done an excellent job of having successful strips. And so we had about 50 agency folks that were trained that day, and it was wildly successful. So we thank Dave for hosting, and it was a great experience. We also, as Beth said, hosted the Laird Norton Family Foundation. Since about 2018, the Laird Norton Family Foundation has granted us about $200,000 in unrestricted funds, which is huge in an organization like ours to be able to match grants and support our administrative costs and new programs. So we loaded up the group in the Mary Green Marvel, which some of you know about that bus, Steve Wallace's bus, and took them around to visit all our project sites, which included Jim Munch's farm to talk about grazing, included Travis Klinkner's farm in the Bad Axe watershed to talk about his work in grazing as well, and cover crops. And we had a nice lunch at Sit and Pretty Farm, and so it was really fun to, like Beth said, really highlight all the projects that we were really able to do with their assistance that we wouldn't have otherwise. Before I turn it back over to Beth, I just want to say that it's been a great year, and as I look out into the room with all these very historically important people to VSN, whether you're a past staff member, past board member, past leader like Tom Lukens and founder Kathy Fairchild. Lots of and very important people are in the room tonight. Just really thank you for all your support through the years. You can see VSN's doing some great work, and I just want to say that Beth has done a tremendous job, and I think you can see by all the staff's comments tonight that we're doing great work, and she's done a great job of taking over the helm and steering us into the new era. And so I just wanted to take a minute to just really thank Beth for her leadership.
Thank you, Kelly.
Well, I know we're getting a little short on time. I just want to tell you a little bit about this upcoming effort that we have, the Kickapoo Bird Habitat Initiative, which actually had begun before I came on pre-COVID as a interagency partnership with Mississippi Valley Conservancy, the Kickapoo Valley Reserve, the DNR, the Ho-Chunk Nation, and Wildcat Mountain State Park as an effort to coordinate bird conservation efforts between some of the important bird areas that are near us. And I just want to show you here on this map how we're situated very close to three large important bird areas. The Kickapoo Wildcat, which kind of bridges Wildcat Mountain State Park and the upper reaches of the Kickapoo River. The lower Kickapoo important bird area, and the Rush Creek important bird area. So there is a need for improving habitat continuity between those three areas. And so we're working with all of these organizations to talk about coordinating management on those public lands, and then also working with private landowners that are with kind of in between and around those areas to do management that would help build habitat continuity. So we just recently received word that we were approved for a grant through the Wisconsin Bird Conservation Partnership to fund our work with this. So very pleased that we're going to get a start on that in the coming year. And then as kind of part of this push toward bird conservation, which really is my baby, I have a background in bird research, so I'm really excited to be kind of bringing that aspect to it. We've started offering some bird-friendly products for sale, and really there is quite a strong need for especially stopping bird window collisions. A lot of you probably heard about the big tragedy during the fall migration in Chicago, where there were just hundreds of thousands of birds laying on the streets of Chicago. So that's all, a lot of that is due to just reflective glass that looks like sky to them. So it's really, there's a strong need to address that problem as bird populations are declining through a number of stressors. So there's one that we can directly address just as individuals. So back in March, Danny had the pleasure of awarding a Conservation Stewardship Award to Barent Froyland, and that was to recognize his work with the Tainter Creek Farmer-led Watershed Council. And we actually have another Conservation Stewardship Award that we'd like to award tonight. If I could get Dave Van Dyke to come up to the front for a moment. So we're going to put him on the spot and surprise him. Dave, we just want to recognize all the hard work that you've done on your own land and acting as a host so that we could do outreach for planting prairies and helping us with these events, and now serving as a board member. You've just been an exemplary steward of conservation, so we want to present you with this plaque tonight.
Thank you very much. I enjoy it thoroughly.
And just to talk a little bit about the work that Dave has done, he and Betty have had their farm for 45 years, and they have row crops and hay and gardens there. And like Dave mentioned in his infiltration work, there's 3 different prairie strips there on their land, and they've hosted field days and SARE on-farm research and demonstrations. And actually Dave has started harvesting his field for prairie seed that we've been able to use to supplement our planting. So that's an exciting new area. So we're getting a little short on time, so I'm just going to give everybody about 5 more minutes to put in any final bids on the silent auction items, and then in 5 minutes we'll announce who the winners are of those. And if anybody has to run and we have your contact info down, we can contact you after the fact if need be. So, thanks a bunch, everybody, for coming.